Ground ball to Locklear. Charges at first base, and this one is over. The Mariners shut out the Texas Rangers. It is their largest.
Top of the order, and Stephen Kwan.
Drill deep right field. If it's fair, it's gone. It is off the pole.
Game around completely.
And a breaking ball is hammered out toward left center field. Robles chasing it near the wall. It's gone. Jordan. Javi drills it deep left field. Arozarena at the wall. Drills the ball down the line towards the corner. It's gone.
There's 2-2. So look at the battles in Julio. There's a swing across.
That's a base hit, and the Rangers win it.
Wrist into the wall.
Hayward drives one high and deep to right field. All the way back. It's gone.
Well, it is Mariners off season, and it's as if the Mariners just couldn't just leave themselves alone from the news and the media for at least a day, but they did. And because of that, we've got to talk about it because Mariners are not in the playoffs. Yes, we have Mariner fans happy about Houston Astros losing out to the Detroit Tigers, but honestly, that's none of my business because I'm just too distracted by the fact that the Mariners, that they flamed out of their playoff chances. But welcome to an episode of the Mariners Talk, and hopefully you guys are having a good day. And Trident, who is joining me, how are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. The Mariners season ending came as a little bit of a relief in kind of a weird way. It was just such a draining season with the expectations we had that it's been. I'm gonna miss baseball in like 2 weeks, but right now I'm kind of enjoying the non-baseball, to be perfectly honest with you.
To perfectly explain the 2024 Mariners season, I would call it the season that just wouldn't die, because there were several occasions where we're like, okay, they're done. Like we even saw Mariners Mojo, our friends, the Mojo, they were like, yeah, we're kind of done. It's mid-August, meh. And then Dan Wilson gets hired, and then there's some kind of new excitement, and then something happened between like the Angels and the A's, like, okay, this is over. And then the Yankees were like, we're probably like, okay, this is over. And it's like, it just kept moving the goalposts until the very end.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of knew when Houston passed the Mariners that it wasn't going to happen, but they kind of did just enough to keep themselves alive. You know what I mean? Like they just kept clinging to life a little bit, where you're like, okay, they can sweep this series and there's a shot. So, and funny enough, they ended up only one game out, and I mean, we'll probably touch on it, but look at that one game they blew to the Royals, and that could have been the difference. So they ended up being kind of close to getting in. Not that that's acceptable, but for all the ups and downs, they did kind of claw back into it a little bit.
The Royals game, I think about the two Tigers games when Scott Service pulled Bryce Miller and Brian Wu very abruptly. I mean, we can just go on and on. Or Julio Rodriguez's brain fart base running when he got scared of a bat, and Arozarena just mindlessly. Honestly, I think he was just very clumsy with his bat. Like that guy has butterfingers of a hand. Like someone like glue his hands or tape his hands to the bat, just like exactly what they did in the movie Benchwarmers. Remember when that little girl duct taped his hands to the bat, and then he actually made really good contact because of it. So maybe that's something that they should do for next season. But however, I mean, it is what it is. Unfortunately, I know I'm supposed to be very charged up, but not as much charged up. I mean, there's going to be things we're going to talk about that's going to get us all charged up. And before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you that was part of our YouTube channel, both of us, where we saw huge, massive growth. I saw growth of around 700 subscribers. I think you saw something like, I think you had 2,000 that you gained.
Yeah,
you did very well considering that you had a very difficult work schedule. I had a very difficult work schedule, but it was you guys that kept us going. All that engagement, and also all of you that kept me going with all those live shows, because there were times I just didn't want to do it because of the state of the Mariners, but you guys kept me into it. And even then, it was people like all of you that inspired me to do a live show right in the middle of the Mariners getting just absolutely bounced by the Dodgers, which was the day before Scott Service got fired. But I did the show anyway. After looking at the score, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll let people in so people can say what they need to say. And that was my most successful show, was off of the Mariners playing garbage.
Well, we know how much you love Scott Service, so you had to be there for his final game, of course.
I had to. It was a going away party. It was a great idea. I'm so glad I did it for you, Scott. You're the man. But yeah,
one last parting gift.
Yeah, of course. But before we even get to where we're going to get to, this show is sponsored by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a mobile ticketing app for sporting events, concerts, and other events. They make the buying experience easier by the app ranking each ticket from 0 to 10 to see if you are getting a good deal, and you can see exactly where you are sitting. I regularly use that app, and I have had nothing but a fantastic experience with SeatGeek. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get $20 off of your first purchase. Link to the code, app, and website will be in the description, so take advantage, and thank you. So yes, whether you are a Mariners fan looking to plan to buy tickets for next season, or if you're a Seahawks fan, or if you're a fan in Major League Baseball where your playoff teams are in the playoffs, take advantage of my code, RoofTopSports, for $20 off. At least you can save $20 on food because, my God, those food prices are just absolutely enormous. So at least use the code to save yourself some money. Now to the good stuff, which, speak of, we are going to talk about the good stuff. It is about the 2024 Seattle Mariners. And although the season ended in a very disappointing fashion, something that we just didn't want. I mean, they blew a 10-game lead faster than 95 Angels did. I mean, come on. But there were good things out of the season. I mean, it's not like they lost 100 games or anything like that, but there were good things that happened. And Trident, what was that one good thing you really liked out of the 2024 season?
Yeah, I mean, despite all the frustrations, there were a lot of positives. I think the one that stands out for me the most, I mean, I've got multiple, but I think the first one that comes to mind is Bryce Miller. I was very hesitant on him coming into the year. Again, not that I didn't think he was a major league caliber pitcher. I thought he was more of a back end guy, kind of a one pitch pitcher, what we saw last year. And I viewed him more as a number four starter, some good stuff, but it's going to get hit hard from time to time. And he really stepped up this year, finishes, I think, with the fourth lowest ERA in the American League, did not wear down as the season came to an end, which was something I thought might happen. Made every single start this year. Even early in the year, it was kind of like, oh, he struggles on the road. He got that figured out, and the second half was just as good on the road as he was at home. And I mean, you could make a case. I'd probably still take Logan Gilbert, but you could make a case Bryce Miller was the best pitcher on this staff this season. And what a step forward for a guy that I think was more of a back end guy kind of last year, now developing into, a possible what? I mean, he might finish in the top 5 in Cy Young voting in the American League. So I'll go with Bryce Miller as my first real positive for the season.
I really do like that. I do agree with that about Bryce Miller because a couple reasons. One, he was on my fantasy baseball team and he was the biggest steal in my draft. Like, I drafted him in the 14th or the 16th round, when that's usually when people doze off. And I know you have that experience because you had a draft that was like a draft selection of 3 minutes long. And by that point, you're probably like, whatever. I just click on whatever, or just let it go auto. But I was focused. I was like, Bryce Miller's, I got to take him. So I did it, and it paid off. Now, the second thing I liked about Bryce Miller, although he is known to really be fastball reliant, he really did at least mix it up just by a little bit. You looked at that Baseball Savant 2023, I think you saw his fastball going into the 50s and 60%. But then this time he actually went below 50 at least. You saw it the game that stuck out, the Houston game towards the end of the season. Yes, he was pitching fastballs, but then he mixed it up later on and he pitched very well. So Bryce Miller also surprised me too. I thought he was beginning of the season, my prediction was I thought he was going to eventually have a role for the bullpen eventually, but I guess not so much, at least for now. So had a great season, huge part of the starting rotation. So that's something I do agree with. Now, my turn for what I thought that was a good for the season. Now, I would say Dan Wilson and like Edgar Martinez, but I think everyone would say that's obvious. Like that was like a really good hire on both of them. Hopefully that Edgar at least stays. Give him, I guess maybe he's the huge contract extension that he would get.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So that's like the obvious one. But the one I really liked was Victor Robles.
Yeah.
Like when the Mariners signed him, like all of us were like, who? Okay, he's like some former prospect from the Nationals, didn't really do much. So what are we going to expect? We probably should have signed some other guy. Maybe there's some better options. Who knows? But Victor Robles caught us by surprise by not only his energy that he brought to the team, but he definitely replaced J.P. Crawford as the leadoff guy for the future. Like his hustle, the bunt where he's like this, and the next thing you know, he just snaps for a bunt and he gets like an infield base hit, or at least he moves the runners. So I thought he was a really smart guy. He knew how to bunt because desperately that team really needed to bunt at times. Because I remember during service, the team almost never bunts. But then under Dan Wilson, we got to see a lot more potential out of Victor Robles. And if you notice, he was hanging in around like, 260s, 270s when Scott Service was around. But then when you saw Edgar and Dan Wilson take over, Victor Robles actually went into the threes. And that's something that is practically foreign for the Mariners, is seeing someone with a 300 or above. Heck, even like 275 or above is like the equivalence of like 320 back in the old days for the Mariners, at least for their standards. And it makes me feel a little bit better going into the off season and the next season, because now that leaves like a little bit less holes, because I was really like grieving about the fact that Jared Kelenic was gone. But with that core, you got Randy Arozarena, Julio Rodriguez, and Victor Robles. And if everyone gets it right, that could actually be a very sleeper outfield. So, and with that contract extension, we'll at least get to see another season out of Victor Robles, and hopefully he'll at least replicate from 2024, if not do any better. So that's my goods for 2024.
Yeah, it was that was going to be my other one. If you came back around and say another one, it was going to be Victor Robles. And listen, he was a top prospect in the national system. He was actually rated higher than Juan Soto at one point. Now, I'm not claiming he's better than Juan Soto. He's not. But it's not crazy that a guy that was a highly rated prospect found his groove and becomes a really good baseball player. Some guys are later bloomers than others, and they just need that change of scenery. So I think that's the other encouraging thing for me, not only what he did this year and all the numbers you pointed out, but the fact that it isn't just like, oh, this is some 40-year-old that's been in the minor league system for 15 years. And you're like, how sustainable is this? He was a legit prospect. So this could be something that is very sustainable. And no, I'm excited with that outfield as well. And then you have Luke Raley there too, who would be another one, I think, to put in the good category, would be the season Luke Raley had. So the outfield is shaping up, assuming we'll see what happens trade-wise, but shaping up to be a pretty decent outfield, hopefully. Just got to find that consistency.
Yeah, let's hope that they do that, and we'll have to see where the offseason holds. And because there's plenty of options out there in the outfield free agent market, but if those three can hold it together, like if Randy Arozarena can like stop stepping back when the guy's literally winding the pitch, I'll even take that as a step forward. So those are the goods. We've talked about Bryce Miller, Victor Robles, and Dan Wilson, Edgar Martinez. And now the really fun part. Let's talk about the bads. Oh, the bads. Oh man, where do I even start? Like, if you have one, go for it.
I think the first obvious, outside just the team in general, failing expectations, you've got to start with Polanco and Mitch Garver, right? Like, I mean, they were the biggest acquisitions you made in the offseason offensively, and they had moments where they were okay. They had little hot streaks here and there. Polanco had kind of that one streak after that series where we were all done, ready to DFA him. Then he played really well. Then he kind of tailed back off. Garver Started out really slow, had a month run there where he was decent and had a pretty decent September, but he was brought in to be your full-time DH, was not very good. The fact that he can catch helps, gives him a little value. And Polanco, same thing, was brought in to help stabilize that position. He was certainly better than Colton Wong, but it was not good enough, and both fell way below their career norms. So those are the first two that just come to my mind right away if you talk about disappointments of this season.
It's very disappointing because think about the idea that the Mariners traded away Eugenio Suarez, Jared Kelenic. Now, granted, that was really just to get rid of Marco Gonzalez and Evan White because they had pretty albatross of the contracts. But man, they traded all those guys away just to get Mitch Garver, who now ultimately is the backup catcher. So that's what makes it more painful, is that Mitch Garver's may be starting the 2025 season as a backup catcher. So he's basically pretty much a very expensive Tom Murphy. And at this point, if he ends up being as good as Tom Murphy was in the 2023 season, you know what? I'll take it. I mean, if you think about it for next year, like the positive thing maybe out of Mitch Garver that we can get out of him is maybe there will be less pressure on him this time, because then he's just going to be a backup catcher, so he doesn't have to do too much. Maybe the occasional DHing if someone's tired or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because this season, he was actually expected to be one of the huge anchors of this offense, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out. And it's really unfortunate because it really got to the point where, I mean, he was getting those death threats where, don't know if that was you're not supposed to do that. Like, don't make it personal, but when you hear the word death threats are coming to Mitch Garver, that's where it gets really, really bad. That's where everything's just pretty much lost. But fortunately, at least he had some good moments in September. So hopefully he can figure that out. And as for Polanco, he has that team option. I don't think the Mariners are picking it up. And granted, with the minor league depth that the Mariners have, and like Cole Young, I almost like Colton Wong, Cole Young could actually be major league ready. Go for it. Give him a chance. Let him be with the spring training team. Let him vibe with JP Crawford. Let him compete for a spot. And that's if the Mariners don't get anyone in the free agent market. But yeah, Polanco, I can't trust him. I can't trust him going forward. And you know what? Even if he does well anywhere else, so be it. I mean, I felt the same way about Teoscar. If he does well in Los Angeles, so be it. Because same thing with Teoscar. Even if he stayed in Seattle, he probably would have had similar numbers here anyway. Now, we would have taken it for sure, but it's not like we're all going to be here saying, oh, we should have kept Teoscar and like Polanco because they blew up. It's like, it doesn't always work that way. It's about environment and the situation. But I'm ready for my bads. How about the bullpen? The bullpen was absolutely disappointing because I remember, and I had a video about it where I was talking about how terrified I was just to think about the idea of Gregory Santos, Matt Brash, and Andres Munoz as your three-headed monster in the bullpen. Like, that was supposed to be like the best bullpen in baseball. And I think that bullpen actually could have made history. Like, I even made bold statements saying that it could possibly be better than 2001 bullpen. And that was absolutely a lights out bullpen as well. But what did we get? Matt Brash was injured with that Tommy John. Gregory Santos barely saw time. And when we did see him, he did show signs that he could actually be a huge contributor, but he wasn't healthy. And then it was all left with Munoz to be the guy. And thank God, because he actually did exceed my own expectations, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough. But yeah, we saw like Ryan Stanek didn't work out. Taylor Saucedo regressed. Gabe Spire with injury problems. Trent Thornton, like, he was actually decent last season, and now he turned into basically someone that you would have as a mop-up guy. And then we had there was the Tyson Miller experiment, which in my opinion, I thought the Mariners should have held on to him because he still went on to pitch a fantastic season. But at least before I even get to like any slight positive things about the bullpen, like, it was painful to watch. Like, we saw them like starters, they did their job. And then once they were out, we were thinking like, yeah, they should be able to at least hold some kind of lead with the bullpen as talented as they are. and then they failed. Like we saw it with the Detroit games. We saw some Astros games of meltdowns. Like so many meltdowns happened. Like it's crazy to say, but I was feeling 97 feeling. And if anyone remembers that bullpen with Bobby Ayala, Norm Charlton in his later days, you get the idea. But there were some positives out of that bullpen. Like we saw Troy Taylor, he made some progress. At least he showed that he could at least mop things up and not screw things up too much. I mean, I just wouldn't put him in a high leverage situation, but he is a young man, so he does have things to work on. But I do give him credit that he started in just A+ level. And I looked up his transaction reports that he was actually originally drafted by the Mariners in 2021, but then he decided not to sign, so he got drafted again in 22. So he sure worked his heart out to get to where he was, or get to where he got. And I'm trying to remember like any other relief pitchers that actually. Colin Snyder was also a big gem that the Mariners were able to pick up. And that's the one thing you got to give Jerry Dipoto is he can find at least someone from off the streets, which we talked about last year. Like we made that joke saying he goes to downtown Seattle, whether it's in Cap Hill or Pioneer Square or Chinatown, going, "Hey, you're right there. Yeah, man. You're the pitcher of the bullpen. Come on, let's go." Like he does that. He did that pretty well. I mean, that's how he found Paul Sewald. It's how he found Kendall Graven. It's how he found Matt Brash. I don't know. I think Brash was a draftee, but you get the idea.
He was traded. He was traded for Williams. I think Trevor Williams. Is that the guy that was closing in 2020 or something like that? I think he was in that trade from San Diego.
Wow. And as long as Matt Brash holds up healthy, then what a great trade it was. And if all we remember, that's how the Andres Munoz trade happened, through trading a backup catcher in Austin Nola. So, I mean, that was a great value trade, and that's what got Ty France. So you said that it was the Mitch Garvers and the Jorge Polancos, and I will say that it was the bullpen, which was very disappointing. And worst of all, Mariners also traded away Jonathan Clase for Jimmy Garcia, and that also didn't work out. And boy, if the Mariners don't give him that extension, it's really going to make that Clase trade look bad, especially if he does anything in Toronto. We don't know if that will happen, so it remains to be seen, but maybe a few years from now, we'll get the idea of what that trade was. But maybe as of now, just by forecasting it, maybe the trade will just be a push. But now the Blue Jays have an idea to get the full potential out of Jonathan Clase. So that is going to be the bads. Now, before we get into the really, really fun part, literally the hottest topic in the Mariners offseason, this video is also brought to you by SoFi Bank. SoFi is an online bank and a personal financing company offering financial diverse products. They hold the naming rights to the home of the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Chargers, named SoFi Stadium. They offer amazing checking and savings accounts where you can get up to 4.6% on savings accounts. There are no monthly fees to maintain the accounts, and they have over 55,000 no-fee ATMs around the United States. You even have access to a budgeting program, stock trading, and insurance programs. Join SoFi and get $25 for joining and or $25 for opening a stock trading account. Links are available in the description. And thank you. And lastly, I am not a financial advisor, so either find a professional financial advisor or go with your own gut. Yep, so use that promo code RoofTopSports. The links will be in the description if you would like to get some free money. And I do mean it. If you're a young man or a young woman, especially in Generation Z, if you just turned 18, happy birthday. Start investing. Go for it. Get that IRA account. Invest into retirement because it's tax deductible. And again, I'm not a financial advisor, but at least invest in your future. At least invest in your grandchildren's future too. Anyways, now we're going to go into the beefy part, which is talking about the concerns of ownership and Jerry Dipoto. And boy, this one's going to be fun because I remember I was preaching about how bad this ownership really was back in like 2014. And everyone gave me that looks of like, what are you talking about? Like, no, that's not true. Who cares about that stuff? And now today it's now becoming more mainstream. And I'm like, I wish I had a YouTube channel talking about it back then so people could just say I'm insane. But I did come across an article, and I think it was from like the Seattle Times. Actually, it was from the Seattle Times, but I got this snapshot, and I'll read it verbatim. It is, what is clear, the Mariners do not intend to dive deep in the deep end of free agency pool this winter, which means they won't pursue the likes of Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, or Alex Bregman, or any high-priced veterans, not because they can't afford it. John Stanton himself explained, because it is a matter of baseball economics, the Mariners don't want to pay top dollar for aging players. Wow. Didn't know that Juan Soto and like Pete Alonso were aging players. It gets even better. The scars of the Robinson Cano contract 11 years later still feels like a fresh wound from the Mariners. Okay. We've got the resources to do the things we need to do to put together a good team on the field. He's probably said that every single year. Said in the interview in the Times, and this was in June. We've been focused on free agent bats, those kind of big dollar free agent bats, as a matter of strategy, not because of anything to do with resources. So, few problems I have with that, and I've already said it, like Juan Soto and Pete Alonso and even Bregman are arguably in the primes of their career, so I wouldn't necessarily call them necessarily old and washed up. And the Robinson Cano contract, yes, it was a 10-year, $240 million contract, but what did the Mariners get out of it? They got a borderline MVP player consistently every single year, a 3-time All-Star, OPS of above 800 consistently. He brought over Nelson Cruz to the team. He even nearly hit 40 home runs. Like, some of his best offensive seasons was actually in Seattle, other than the New York Yankees. And even then, like, even with all the suspension baggage, the Mariners were still able to get off of that contract. And along with that trade with Edwin Diaz, Mariners still got Jared Kelenic out of it and Justin Dunn, which, by the way, little do people know, Justin Dunn actually turned into a package for Eugenio Suarez. So I think the Robinson Cano thing is a little bit short-sighted, because I do think the Mariners made great out of that Robinson Cano contract. And most of all, they got the Mets to actually sucker and pay for a part of that contract too. Because usually teams would have made like the Mariners pay for that contract, but they somehow negotiated to basically foot the bill on the New York Mets. And of course, the last statements of like resources and strategy, like, I mean, how has that worked? Like, how has that worked? Like, getting Mitch Garver? What about, was it AJ Pollock? How did those work? Didn't exactly age well. So those are my thoughts on that entire article. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you love reading that the day after a disappointing season ends, that they're not going to be in on some of the top guys that are available, and that you wouldn't have to trade prospects for, that you can just give money to and bring on board. I'm also with you that, listen, I'm all for staying away from massive contracts to aging veterans. That's fine. I could even stomach, like, I could get why they might not be interested maybe in certain, aging guys. That makes sense. Juan Soto, not an aging guy. I never expected Juan Soto to come here, but they're lumping them all in together. It's like, oh, we're not going after those guys. And it's like, well, fine, I can understand, hey, you wanted to avoid Chris Bryant or something like that. That would have been a disaster to have that contract here. There are certainly free agents that are landmines, but there's also ones that can help your team, help get this team over the top. So it's kind of like they're bunching everything in together. Oh, I'm not going to give out the big contracts. Sure, there's scenarios where that is smart, but I mean, to just announce that you're not in on a Juan Soto, I think is a little ridiculous. I mean, I guess I could say I appreciate the honesty, but it's kind of a weird thing to just come out and announce. Like I said, and like you said with the Cano deal, I mean, they keep pointing to that as some massive negative, and it really wasn't. Cano was good while he was here, really good the first 2 seasons. Or no, he was here for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So he's here 5 years. First 2-3 years, really good. 18 was a little bit of a down year because the steroid stuff, the suspension. And then right before the drop-off, they traded him for a huge haul. So it really wasn't, like you said, then the trickle down back to that. Now, Kelenic didn't quite work out, neither did Dunn, but that was still a tremendous prospect haul that the Mariners got for Cano and Edwin Diaz for a rebuilding team. So that did work out fine for the Mariners. They got what they needed out of it. So, I can understand some guys not going after. I can't think of like an aging guy. Like, Paul Goldschmidt's going to be 37. Give Paul Goldschmidt 10 years? Heck no. That's reasonable. Juan Soto, what is he, 23? I'll give him 15 years. We'll worry about him tailing off after a couple World Series wins. You know what I mean? That's the other thing too. It's like, oh, you're going to be miserable in 2055 when Juan Soto's 37 and awful. Sure, but if you can win me, and nothing gives a World Series win, but if I can win 3 or 4 World Series in between there, I'll stomach the 55 win seasons at the tail end of it for a couple years. John, if you can get me 3 World Series wins, I'll sit through a 100 loss team. Deal? But
I'm okay with that. Like, I remember after the 2018 season when the Mariners at that point were just stagnating, and when they said that they were going to blow it up, I was like, okay, fine. There are seasons where it is appropriate to set those ones out of like basically saying, hey, everyone's getting old, or it just didn't work out. We're just going to rebuild. But hey, check out our farm system teams. Check out the Tacoma Rainiers. Check out go fly to Arkansas. Go to Everett. Go to Modesto. Fine. I think that's perfectly fine. And there's risks that are to be taken. And you know what? Cano was a great risk to take. I was okay with it because it was a very hopeless time. Like, remember in 2013, after that was full of hopelessness. Like, if it wasn't for the Seahawks having that Super Bowl run, imagine the state of Seattle. Because that's also the time when the Sonics nearly came back to Seattle under Sacramento. That didn't happen. And on top of it all off, we have a sucky baseball team. So Cano was actually a great signing. And I still think there was no regrets to it.
Well, and the funny thing was they signed Cano after 2013. That 2013 team was not good. I mean, they lost 91 games. They were not a competitive team. And that team even went out and said, hey, we're getting, because Cano was the best free agent at the time. I remember I was blown away when the Mariners were in on Robinson Cano and went out and got the best free agent available. This Mariners team was good. They won 85 games. They underperformed what we hoped for, but with this rotation, this is a good, not great baseball team. Juan Soto, and again, I understand he may not come here. Like, I get it. I'm not saying you would have been a lock to get Juan Soto, but a player like that, you could absolutely go Randy, Julio, Juan Soto, Robles, whatever, at that point, or trade Randy and then put Robles in left. I mean, and you may just from that move have a team that could compete for a World Series with a player of that caliber. So the 2013 team that was dreadful was willing to dip its toes into big free agency and almost paid off. The 2014 team was close. The 2016 team was close, not good enough, but close. And this year's team, I don't think the Mariners are far off from being a really good baseball team, but I think at some point it's going to take another superstar to kind of get them over the top. Now, with that said, like, can it work with the strategy they're doing? Yes, but then you have to hit on the Polancos and the Garvers, and those guys are risky, right? Like, they're good baseball players, but they're not those superstar guys that you like. You get a Shohei Ohtani, you know what he's going to give you. Juan Soto, you know what he's going to give you. You know what I'm talking about? Like, just those Bryce Harpers, the superstar of this league. You know what they're going to give you. You go in the second, third tier free agent, they can work out, but Justin Turner, kind of a third tier guy, comes in, works out. But you also have a risk because those guys have flaws. That's why Mitch Garver only gets a 2-year deal. He's a flawed player. Doesn't mean he's bad. Coming into this year, he was bad this year, but it's risky. So you need a lot to go right. Whereas if you just go get a Juan Soto, easier said than done, you're getting a superstar, barring injury or just something so crazy that you've no idea.
Absolutely. And what really strikes me is that Mariners' time is really ticking. Like, I was saying that the last 2 seasons that their time was ticking, because that was when Cal Raleigh Logan Gilbert, George Kirby. They were not even in arbitration years. And now look where we are. We just wasted 2 seasons. Like, we wasted 2023, which that was, now to think of it, we were complaining back then, but that was a damn good baseball team. Like, if you put 2023 and 2024, they could have actually been a 100-win team easily. And what else is to say? But yeah, what I'm saying is they wasted that, and then they wasted the best starting rotation in franchise history, and arguably can say the best starting rotation in all of baseball. And we wasted that too. And now we're going into the arbitration years where Cal Raleigh's going to go up in price, Kirby's going to go up in price, Gilbert's going to go up in price. And yes, Jerry Dipoto did say, yes, we will likely cover those guys. Great. Good for you. Like, when they said that we're going to basically increase payroll just to cover those guys, which they're basically doing, that's almost less than the bare minimum. But the concern is, if they're not going to go for anyone else, then that's where the window starts to close even more. Then you'll get into the years where you'll have to negotiate for new contracts. So that's why I thought 23 and 24 were very critical. And unfortunately, the Mariners wasted both of them. And now we're entering years where Cal Raleigh's going to be like, hey, where's my contract? George Kirby's going to say, hey, where's my contract? What about Gilbert? He wants his contract. Julio's not going to get cheaper. Castillo's is not going to get cheaper. So the longer they went cheap, and the ironic thing to think about, the longer you go cheap, the more expensive it's going to get in the future, especially with less assets. So if we were to compare the years of, like, back in 95, so 22 was basically the 95 kind of thing. We're pretty much going into like 98 and 99 levels of concern. So I really hope that it could be 2000s or it could be 2003 for all I know. So I really hope that John Stanton changes his mind and at least go for the guys of, like, Juan Soto, at least, even though it's not going to happen. We all know that's not going to happen. I mean, no, but at least Alex Bregman. I'm looking at some other guys. Ha-Sung Kim, maybe. Gleyber Torres. At least should maybe try for Pete Alonso and, like, the Christian Walkers. At least Carlos Santana's going to be old guy, but hey, he'd be a convenient one to get. At least any of them that's, like, mid-tier, at least. Like, most of us fans, it's not like we're asking for that 10-year billion-dollar contracts. We're sometimes just asking for the mid-level players that will actually help you get to the top so you can, like, provide protection for Julio, because look at Julio this year. He had 0 protection until basically after the trade deadline, and that's where you noticeably saw him finally pick it up, because at least he had Victor Robles picking up, and, like, Randy Arozarena was... I could say that he could be the best baseball player when he wanted to be. That's the vibe I got out of him. So, I mean, spending money is going to be a need eventually. Like Cal Raleigh said after 23, it has to be done, or else next thing you know, we will be going back and saying, man, if the ownership really wasted the years of great starting pitching, Cal Raleigh, Julio, like, we're talking another wasting era. Like, this is the most exciting team I have ever seen since the 90s core. Like, at some point, I was actually more excited because we had some really great bats and great pitching. Because back in the day, Mariners had problems with the bullpen and, like, even getting starting pitching, because all it was like Randy Johnson, Jamie Moyer, Jeff Becerra, but your 4 and 5s were like, who? Like Bob Wolcott, Dennis Martinez, like when he was on his downside, Ken Cloud. But this time we have all 5 of them could literally be all-stars all at once for next season. That's all I gotta say about the ownership. I'm saying too much because we're burning time, but now Jerry Dipoto. I'm very concerned that they brought him in. Like, I was thinking, like, they really should let him go after this season because he's had his time. He had his time during the Cano years, and I actually gave him a free pass because I was like, okay, fine. He had the Jack Zarenzik stuff to deal with. Okay, fine. And maybe it wasn't exactly his image. Fine. Like, I was okay when he went with that rebuild. I was like, go for it. See what you can do with the farm system. And don't get me wrong, he's done great with that. But he holds on to his prospects too long. Some of those prospects didn't work out. Like Evan White didn't work out. Jared Kelenic didn't exactly work out. And now we're in the year where, especially in the championship windows the Mariners had, Jerry squandered them by getting AJ Pollock, Colton Wong, like Mitch Garver, Jorge Polanco, when there were plenty of others that he could have gotten. And then, of course, the comments of 54% doing the fan base a favor. So I honestly think that it is time to just let it go. Like, please let him go. Get someone that is determined to get a World Series. Like, I'll throw a name out there. Theo Epstein. He doesn't have a job in Major League Baseball right now. Get him in. He broke 2 curses that combine nearly 200 years worth of curses. And he can certainly break whatever the Mariners have is a 50-year drought of no World Series. Your takes on the Jerry man?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jerry overall has done more good than bad here. I really do. I think the farm system's in great shape. I think the core of this team is good. I said several times on my channel, if Jerry were fired tomorrow, I think this is an attractive job. Now, John Stanton and company notwithstanding on that, but just if you looked at the landscape of the Mariners in baseball, it's a town that will embrace a winner. I mean, you get this team a World Series win, you'll never have to buy a drink in this town ever again. So I do think there's a lot of good things that have been done here. And I think a lot of the downfall falls on ownership, more so. But we've talked about it, right? You can't do anything about that. Owners aren't going to fire themselves. I think it was, who was the 49ers owner? Jed York.
Like owners cannot be fired.
Yeah. So sure, I think that would be the best thing for the Mariners, but that's not happening. Jerry just has not gotten this team over the top, right? Like they've been here. Like if this is the hump to get there, they've been close. They've hit it. They've been there. They just can't seem to get over it. And I think Polanco was like a fine trade. I liked Mitch Garver, but your AJ Pollock, all those signings I was okay with, but they didn't work out. They're not finding those right complementary pieces. Maybe just been bad luck and he'll find them this year. I hope so. But I do think, and we've known for a while now, Jerry's coming back, so I've kind of made peace with it. But my take on is going to an organization like a Milwaukee. I know Baltimore ends up being very disappointing this season, but organizations that don't have big payrolls that have found a way, Tampa Bay, to still be consistently in the playoffs, because that's what you have here. John Stanton's not going to spend. So my thing would have been, I'm calling Cleveland, Baltimore, Milwaukee, getting someone in from one of those organizations and going with someone from there that might be able to help you get over the top. Because again, I put most of it on ownership, but Jerry is just, and Justin have just not been able to find the right pieces to take this team from, I don't want to say they're at point A. I think they're at point B, but they need to get to like point C or something. And they just cannot seem to do it. And then Jerry just doesn't have a lot of good with the city right now. So I think it creates some issues there too. He's probably a lame duck GM, meaning if he fails in 25, he's going to be out more than likely. That creates some weird tension, which I don't really like. You know what I mean? It's kind of either start fresh or, I don't know at that point, but can it work? Sure. I think you can push the right buttons. It can work. I don't think the team is destined for failure because of it, but I would have moved on. If it was my decision, I would have moved on, and I would have probably been on the phone with Milwaukee and someone from that organization and seeing what you can get in from there. Or Atlanta too would be another team.
Well, I got a couple ideas. To be fair, there is one way to get John Stanton out of the ownership. We have to hope he says the same thing as Donald Sterling does, and someone bugs his phone. Because remember, Donald Sterling said all those really weird things when he was the owner of the Clippers, and Adam Silver's like, yep, sell the team, you're out of here. Unfortunately, that's going to be the only way John Stanton is. We have to hope that, hell, just say Julio's English is odd. Just say that. And then, yep, new ownership, baby. Second idea, buy trillions of dollars worth of Shiba crypto and hope that it goes to $1 really fast, then sell. Then we'll buy the Mariners and put an end to corruption. We'll split the profits 50-50.
No,
That's
I
the
mean, it
idea.
really is. Unfortunately, to me, that's the biggest issue. And it doesn't mean, listen, it's all like goes hand in hand, right? Do I think ownership stinks? Yes. Does that mean they can't win? No. I mean, teams with worse ownership have won, more games than the Mariners. So that's why I put some of it back on Jerry. But then another question I would ask, and I'll let you take the floor on this. And again, I would have moved on from Jerry. I think it's probably time, but I don't trust John Stanton to hire a right person. I mean, there were some rumors. I don't know if it was true or not, but like his son, I'm like, oh, heck no. I'm not letting John Stanton or anybody from that family bring Jerry back in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? Like have Scott be the GM, like anything but that. So that's the other part of it where it's like, I have no faith that they would even find somebody better. And that shouldn't be how you do things. You should not fire somebody because, I don't know if we can ever do better. You need to make the changes, but my gosh, do I not trust them for the next hire. So by default, I'm
true. Like, I mean, Stanton is basically the same guy as Howard Lincoln. Like, and the scary thing is Howard Lincoln and John Ellis, the CEOs that oversaw the contending Mariners, they are still the board members. So maybe even if Stanton wanted to get what he wanted, it has to go through Howard Lincoln, has to go through John Ellis. And of course they're going to say, no, you got to do it this way. Like that's the dilemma Mariners are in. Bad, not so good GM, bad ownership. How are you going to fix it? I don't know. But at least they put us to work to complain about it. So there we are. There we go.
So thank you, John.
But yeah, thanks, John. Actually, think about it. Jerry is doing us a favor. He's giving us content.
Good man.
So I guess he's right in some aspects, but now we're going to move on because, man, we talked about plenty about this Jerry Dipoto guy and John Stanton and his possible son taking over. And if you want to get an idea of what a son taking over is like, go watch Horrible Bosses and you'll get the idea. Now we'll go into this article that was written by Jim Moore, formerly of Seattle Sports Radio, who was co-host with Kevin Calabro a long time ago, if anyone remembers that. And he was part of 93.3 KJR. Now he's enjoying mostly retirement. And I did have a show with him. Really cool guy. I told him to go to Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon. I told him to check it out because he hangs around there. But here we are. So he has about 10 different ideas. And then we're just going to say real quickly in rapid fire fashion if it's a good idea or a bad idea. Because I think, we can talk about the to-do list and everything, but it seems got a little bit too early. Maybe we'll wait until for another show to talk about that. Because think about it. We could talk about how bad ownership is all in one show. We can talk about how Jerry bad he is in one show. We can talk about the to-dos all in one show. So we'll have plenty of time to go over that. But here's his first idea. It goes from 10 to 1, but number 10, it goes dump both Mitches. Mitch, Garver, and Haniger. We didn't even talk about Mitch Haniger, which we're basically going to say, it was basically the same thing as Garver. You saw it. I saw it. They were terrible this year. Problem is Garver is a guaranteed $12 million coming into 2025. Well, Haniger has a player option of 17, which he will take it. So agree, disagree by dumping all of them. I think that's an easy one.
I mean, sure. I'm going to actually say disagree for a couple reasons. One, I think you're better off just hanging on to Mitch Garver, making him the backup catcher. He still hit lefties pretty well. You're not going to get anything from Mitch. If you trade Mitch Garver, you are going to get nothing in return, and you're going to have to eat minimum half that salary. Your best bet for the 25 team is him finding a little bit of his 23 form, being the backup catcher. I think you kind of alluded to maybe DH against lefties occasionally. And then Haniger is just going to be a problem because you're going to have to trade him, which means you're going to have to offload a better player to get somebody to take that contract because ain't nobody trading for Mitch Haniger. So I agree. Like the premise is correct. I just don't think it's going to be, you're going to have to keep Mitch Garver. I think Haniger 100%. You've got to somehow get that off the books.
I think the best option that they're going to have on Mitch Haniger is you're going to have to give him the Bobby Bonilla contract where you cut him and then you defer his contract. So I think that's going to be the only way. But will ownership do that? Of course not, because they're so cheap. I mean, that's why credit to Steve Cohen. As funny as that Bobby Bonilla contract really is, you know what? Ownership cared enough, and they were willing to spend the money to humiliate themselves in that situation. Because you know what? They were going for a World Series championship in 2000, and it almost worked. And they got David Wright out of that Bobby Bonilla contract, believe it or not.
And to your point, like you said, oh, sorry.
No,
I was just going to say to your point there, like, you're right. Like, they're not going to do that because they're not going to want to pay that out. What I think is going to happen, and this is not from any inside information, this is just my thought. I wouldn't be shocked if they trade someone. I think Munoz is the most likely guy to be dealt. He's got the most value, and I could see them attaching Haniger to that deal and getting less in return than they would normally get. So someone takes Haniger's contract, like very much what the Braves did with Evan White and Marco Gonzalez. Similar type situation, because you're right. They're not going to do that. And I mean, they're not going to keep Mitch Haniger. You cannot roster him. No, if I love you, Mitch, love you. A lot of great memories from you, but you can't roster him. So, man, that's a dicey one. Should have just kept Robbie Ray.
Hindsight is 2020, and I said I was okay with it. And I said he was an upgrade
I did too.
Hernandez, and we have that on record. And I'm willing to embarrass ourselves by saying that it was a good move. But But hey, the consolation prize, to be fair, is if they do the Munoz trade, we can get Paul Sewald back via free agency. So, to be fair, there is an exit strategy on that. Yeah. But do we want to do that? Nah.
I'd prefer not to, but my gut, that's my prediction. That's my bold prediction, is they
great prediction
this offseason. Yep.
Number 9, trade Luis Castillo for a position player who is in his prime and can be counted on to produce, as opposed to someone who's on the backside of his career. Yes, as if they haven't done that so much. Mariners will entertain this idea, and they might. Who knows? I don't know if they will. Castillo costs too much. He'll make $24 million in 2025. As good as he is, he gives up too many home runs, and it will only go downhill from there. What can you get from him? Get what you can. You know, I think it's an idea that they should not avoid the idea, because we've seen everything out of Castillo. I think we saw his best years already. His best year we saw was really just 2022 and the first half of 2023. And it's only going to go down from there. He gets more expensive, gives up more home runs. He was very inconsistent this year. So if they can get some team where you can say, or Jerry can like maybe sell the idea that he still has years left, get me this position player, I would say at least explore the option.
100%, couldn't agree more. It's something I would explore. I'm not like 100%, oh, you have to do that. I'm all for keeping a good rotation together. But again, like you said, with this team and how they are with money, Castillo getting more expensive is going to become a problem for them. So yeah, I'm kind of like, it's something I'd explore, but I'm not like, oh my gosh, you have to do that. If they end up with Castillo on the roster next year and the same 5 starters, totally fine with that too.
Here is number 8, Fire Dipoto, which most of us pretty much agree with at this point. But here's what he said. See, I told you there'd be a pipe dream or two on this list. Somehow this guy has buffaloed ownership into thinking, or buffaloed ownership into thinking. I love Jim Moore. He says all these funny words into thinking he is still the man who can make everything possible for the M's. He talks about wanting to use different approach, blah, blah, blah. How about just going for a new leader? Why don't we try that? I give Jerry's job to general manager Justin Hollander. Or going a completely different direction, hire someone else. I'm going to say 50-50 on that. Like, I agree, fire Jerry Dipoto. I think we've said that more than enough in the show. But not to Justin Hollander. If Jerry's going to go, Justin has to go too.
Agreed. I'm not, like I said, I'm not as gung-ho that Jerry's got to go, but I do lean towards it. Obviously, we know it's not happening, and I wouldn't, if Jerry goes, Justin goes too. I want new voices across the board.
Number 7, we will go this. It says, just don't allow Dan Wilson to be manager in 2025. Dipoto's replacement needs to have a free hand in hiring his own manager. Okay, I get that now. If he deems Wilson to be the guy, fine. But if he doesn't give him the authority to hire the best man in the job, you know what? It's a great point.
Yep.
Because Dan Wilson, I mean, he probably came in the high of like, oh, yeah, I got the job. Or maybe he was reluctant. I don't know. Or the players got the highs of playing for the nostalgic Dan Wilson. So maybe that doesn't translate into next year. And I do think at least Dan Wilson, I think what they should have done, they should have made him interim, and they should have like given the opportunity for Dan Wilson to interview for the job while competing with other hopefully solid candidates. But if there is a new GM, I'd say, yeah, make it an open game. Like, don't completely hand this job to Dan Wilson as if they already have. So this one's also kind of a pipe dream thing. So that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, it just ties in with number 8. So if number 8 doesn't happen and it's not, Jerry's coming back, then I disagree, but I agree in theory. And we actually talked about that on a show once. If you bring in a new GM, you can't be like, oh, by the way, we already have your manager for you. Can't do that. Now, if that guy deemed, like Jim said, that Dan Wilson's best guy for the job, fine. But obviously that's like both those aren't happening. So Jerry's staying and so is Dan. So yeah.
The pipe dream,
I like Dan. I thought Dan did well, but yeah.
No, we all love Dan Wilson. Dan Wilson's a great guy.
Yeah.
Number 6, trade Randy Arozarena. Dipoto said that he would like the outfielders to return intact, which I think for the most part is very likely. I think Robles is here to stay. Julio's obviously here to stay. But I'm torn on Arozarena, as he said. He doesn't strike me as a guy who necessarily wants to be in Seattle, which I do agree with that. And his constant habit of stepping out of the box before the pitch. We just talked about that. None of us get that. We don't. He's also up for arbitration, which means he'll make more money. Maybe trade him. So if Jerry can sell the idea that Randy Arozarena is the next big thing, which is probably too late at this point, sure. But the question is, what are you really going to get from him? Like, if you trade him, fine, but you better replace it, because don't put us in the position where they let Teoscar Hernandez go because we thought we had the idea that we were going to get someone better, which that didn't happen. So if Jerry's going to trade Randy Arozarena, you better be getting like a Juan Soto or anyone of those outfielders that have, or even Cody Bellinger if he opts out of that, if that contract is opted out. So I'm going to say a push on Randy Arozarena, as if I do agree, like he steps out of the batter's box for whatever stupid reason, but you got to have a plan with that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree with this one. I think Randy has a decent chance to be traded. And honestly, you might not have to add an outfielder, because if you trust Victor Robles, that's the key. Does Victor Robles, can he repeat when he did 23? Because if you believe he can, now I don't mean you as in, you, I just mean the Mariners or in general. You have Luke Raley as well. So Julio, Luke Raley, and Victor Robles is your outfield. Now you definitely lose depth, and Raley's kind of a platoon guy. They just let him hit lefties, which would be nice to see, but it's a risk. So it's not a foolproof plan, but I think there's a decent chance Randy is traded. I think it's possible. A lot of it to me just depends on how much do you trust Victor Robles' 2024. If you're iffy on it, I think you got to keep him. If you feel like Robles is locked in, then Randy is one of your most tradable pieces, honestly. So I'm going to agree with Jim on that one.
All right, that's cool. I mean, we don't have to agree on everything, so it's all good. Number 4, throw as much money as you can to get Edgar Martinez back. You know what? I'm just going to go straight to the chase.
Agree.
Do whatever you can to bring Edgar Martinez back. I don't even think it deserves an explanation. I think, yes, please bring him back. Not only does he have nostalgia, but he's also good at his freaking job, because the offense was actually pretty good towards the end of the season. It was just like too little, too late. And that's how you that's the best way to describe the Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez hiring, too little, too late. So see what he can do for 2025. And you know what? I'm pretty much going to skip it. As soon as I saw Edgar Martinez, I'm like, yep, do it.
Great.
Number 3, acquire Alex Bregman, because why settle with Luis Urias, Dylan Moore, Josh Rojas? And you know what? I like this one too. Problem is, may not happen because he's going to cost too much, and it was already in that article that they may not do it. But wouldn't that be cool if we could get Alex Bregman here? That would like really spice up the rivalry between the Mariners and the Astros. And he knows the Astros, so he can give advice on how to beat the Astros. You know what? I'm all for it, but is it a pipe dream? Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I like Bregman. I don't think it'll happen either. So I'm with you. It's a pipe dream, but I like the idea of Alex Bregman coming in here. Good defender, good hitter. T-Mobile, definitely big difference from the Crawford boxes for his offensive production, but a good player, a guy that's won a World Series that knows how to win, comes in here, brings a little bit of that attitude, in a good way, positive way, along, we talked about Justin Turner and stuff like that. So no, I agree. I would love it. I think would be a great signing for the Mariners. I don't think it'll happen, but I agree.
Number 2, don't pick up the club option of Jorge Polanco, which we would agree. Replace him with Gavin Lux, who could be available in a Castillo trade with the Dodgers. Lux is an above-average second baseman who will be 27 in 2025. Could end up in a carousel of second basemen the second baseman thing has been a disaster since he left the team. But let's take a look at Gavin Lux's. And I think he killed the Mariners several times too.
Was that him?
Let's take a look.
I couldn't remember if it was him or Max Muncy.
Jason Hayward. All right, here we go. He's a 26-year-old guy, 10 home runs, 50 RBIs, batted 251, 320.
I think he was.
He has injury problems. So honestly, I think I'm going to say no, because it would basically be like getting Jorge Polanco back. And don't forget, he has injury problems, which that was the same thing with Polanco. And he played on an offense that had much more protection. So I think I'm going to say no on that one.
Yeah, I'd really have to dig more into Gavin Lux. It's one of those things that I don't want to just not give an answer. I like the idea. The Dodgers will likely eat Castillo's contract. You know what I mean? They'd be willing to take that. Gavin Lux is a name that I know and I've liked, but I haven't been too familiar with his production. I'd have to dig a little deeper. The premise I do, but I'm kind of like, I'm on the fence until I dug more on Gavin Lux, and that would have to be for another day.
To think about it, Dodgers have really bad starting rotation. So I think the Mariners should try to leverage Castillo to get even more out of it, because if the Dodgers are going to be that desperate for a good starter, depending how they do in the World Series, like one of my friends who's a Dodgers fan, he expects them to be a division series fodder. If that happens, then I think that price tag of Castillo might go up. So try to get anything more than Gavin Lux. But now here's the last one before we go to the ending part of the show.
Win more baseball games.
Acquire Brewers shortstop Willie Adams in free agency to replace J.P. Crawford. Miserable season, yes. Dipoto said he expects a better version of J.P. Crawford next year. Why is that exactly? That's what he asked. I'm asking that too. Why would he rebound from a 202? Better overall, better pop. Another unlikely move. But the Mariners should at least consider moving on from J.P. Crawford. So on that aspect, I do agree. And now looking at, Willie Adams is good. But of course, he probably has the same price tag as the likes of Alex Bregman, so it probably won't happen. But hey, if you can do that, go for it.
Yeah, sure. Willie, I think it's Adames. I think it's pronounced. I think it's Willie Adames. Yeah, again, I don't know. I'm not some of these NL guys, I don't know much because we never see these guys that much. So I'd have to dig into the numbers. Sure. I mean, swap out GP with Willie Adames, totally fine with it. Swap out Rojas, Urias, and Dylan Moore for Alex Bregman, totally fine with it. I can see why I'd expect a JP bounce back. I mean, JP was atrocious this season and banged up. Now, I don't know if you're going to get 2023 JP again. If that was the comment, I'd say, not sure. But man, if you could get like a 105 WRC plus out of JP, it would be a nice bounce back. So again, like, sure, I mean, but it kind of falls into like, and I'm not criticizing Jim Moore's article, but it's kind of like, hey, go get Juan Soto. Go, sure, if we can do all that, great. But the realistic thing would probably be no. I mean, maybe one of those guys, maybe Bregman. I don't know. I could maybe say he's going to be too expensive. Why am I talking myself into the Mariners doing these things?
Because Jim Moore wrote them, and he has big ideas. And hey, don't get me wrong, I love you, Jim. But you sure had a lot of fun writing that article, did you? I really think he did have a lot of fun writing that.
I will say this, if they did, even the ones I disagreed with, if they did all of those things, I think you'd have a better team in 2025.
Yeah, why not?
If you went, Adames, Bregman, Castillo for Gavin Lux. Let's just say Lux bounces back a little bit. Your infield's pretty set. I'm assuming first base, you just, re-sign Justin Turner 1-year deal, trade Randy for something that can help you, and, go from there. Do you think you got a better team? So overall, sure, make it happen. I just don't see them doing a lot of those things, unfortunately.
Unfortunately not. But hey,
they already aren't doing. We already know.
But hey, it was fun to at least read them. I mean, it gave us something to talk about. But anyways, that will be everything we covered about the Mariners. Now we got to go into the closing things, because I at least have one exciting announcement. And the first off, from my fantasy baseball league, I have to just get this out of the way. I really have to. But I did win my fantasy baseball league, and it was on the backs of Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and Bryce Miller, my biggest steal pick. And that was also off of a very disappointing Julio Rodriguez, who I drafted over Shohei Ohtani and Yordan Alvarez. Imagine my team if I had that, but didn't really matter because Julio in the last month, he picked it up. So I think it all worked out in the end. I think it was a great story to tell, but I am proud to say I am a fantasy baseball champion after some years where I was basically you, where I played for like a week or so and I was like, I gave up. But this season I went all in. I was serious. I did it. And I pulled a massive upset on the other guy. The other guy I beat was a first seed. I was a third seed. So he was a big cookie. And it took Logan Gilbert's heroic efforts, near perfect game effort, to put me over the top, along with like very lucky starts, I guess. And also I owe it to anyone that started against the Mariners. And I just gave you my strategy right there of how I won. And the funniest part was the guy going for third place tried to pick up my strategy on Mariners starters. He kept texting me going, "Hey, I just picked up this guy against the Mariners. You're screwed." I was like, okay, then I'm picking up someone against the White Sox then. So whatever he did, I countered. So why am I talking about this? Because due to the very successful fantasy baseball league, I have been able to expand from 8 to 12 going into next season. I actually got lined up all 12. They all said yes as of now. Worst case scenario, probably 10. But we got a new member of this fantasy baseball family. It is the J Trident Podcast, who is in this show. He is going to join for next season. And welcome to the league. And Trident, how do you feel about this edition? As cheesy as I'm asking.
No, excited. Always down to get some good fantasy baseball. I'm excited to be a part of it. Excited to hopefully put a contender on the field and budget. There'll be no John Stanton budget constraints here. We'll spend for the big boys this offseason.
Go all in. And also for the draft. And you know what? It was on record. I'm going to say it. I saw that I was actually watching your live stream draft. And the first thing I saw was 3 minutes on each draft pick. In my league, I do 45 seconds, maybe a minute, but even then a minute feels long, but I do 45 seconds. And once it gets to the second half, I cut it by 15 seconds. And I think a lot of people would appreciate that because they're like, because most people in the last picks are like, I don't care about these picks. Just let it die. I mean, there's only like someone like me that cares about it, but I like to make it a fast-paced draft. So you'll get that experience. And of course, there'll be some opportunities where I'll need you for like, hey, give me like an update on your fantasy baseball team so I can put this on my YouTube content. So overall, again, welcome to the league, and we'll be looking forward to your competition for next year. And I'm sure my defending champion is kind of intimidated by you. It's intimidated by that beard, because when they see that beard, they're like, oh, this guy could be serious.
I trimmed it up though, so it's a little less serious now.
Either way, it's still intimidated. What was that?
I said, appreciate you having me in the league, though.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Regardless of the intimidation.
True. And also, regardless, I appreciate you having you on the show. And for anyone that watched this show, thank you very much for watching. And hopefully we get a better off season. Hopefully nothing like last season. Like, let's have something more of like 2022, for crying out loud. Let's go back to that, where they traded for Adam Frazier, sign Robbie Ray. Yes, I still don't regret that move. I still thought it was a move to do. It was the right move. It just didn't work out. And even then, he was still pretty decent anyway. It was just injuries and bad luck. So let's hope they do that. But that's going to do it. And once again, just want to say thank you for watching and subscribe to myself and J Trident Podcast, as I think he has a lofty goal of going for 10,000, as I have a goal of getting to 5,000 by next baseball season. So we'll see. But that will do it. And everyone, thanks for watching. And go Mariners.